Shellenberger, good to see
Rogan.
you.
Good to see you, man.
How you been, man?
Every day.
You've
Every
been
day.
neck deep in the chaos of the world.
I made it to Brazil and back, so I'll put it that way.
What was that like?
It was intense, man. I mean, it was. It's still going on. We did Twitter Files Brazil,
Right.
and 3 days later, that was back in March. 3 days later, Elon just throws down and starts to attack this main Supreme Court justice, who's the guy that's now banned X. So X is banned in Brazil. They're in negotiations, but it was very exciting to be there and the Brazilians were just relieved. They were like, everything that we thought was happening is proven by the Twitter Files Brazil. And they were just very grateful to Elon. So it's been
What did the Twitter Files? I know about the Twitter Files America. I don't know about the Twitter Files in Brazil.
So this is like one of the most extreme forms of censorship we've seen in democratic countries. India's been pretty bad too, but the worst of it was that they were.
Pull that sucker up.
Is it too okay?
Yeah, sorry, just bring it up to you.
How's that? Is that better?
Good to go.
This is the most dramatic part, is that they were the judge. This is a Supreme Court justice who is basically the dictator of Brazil. Was demanding that particular journalists and politicians just be banned, not only from X, but from every other social media platform, which is a tactic that we had seen in earlier censorship files. We had done something on something called the Cyber Threat Intelligence League with Taibbi, showing this. It was an early military censorship operation, and they'd had a list of tactics, and one of them was to get people banned on every platform. So you're basically like just depersoning people, just destroying their career. You can't make a career as a journalist or a politician if you're banned from every platform. So that was one of the most dramatic parts, all in secret, open investigations, ongoing, and basically there's no checks and balances, there's no chance to argue with it. So that came out, and Elon responded like 3 days later and was like, yeah, Brazil's like the worst in the world, and just starts attacking the Supreme Court justice as like Darth Vader and Voldemort and doing what Elon does. Fast forward to last month, and they had a huge protest in Sao Paulo, one of the largest free speech protests in history, which was itself just amazing and inspiring because, free speech has been something that we didn't really think we had to fight for. So to see like hundreds of thousands of people in the streets of Sao Paulo was amazing. I was there with the former president. He sort of sees me, brings me up. I'm up on top of the stage. He's, yelling at the crowd. Everyone's worked up. He kind of looks over at me and covers the mic, and he's like, "It's Shellenberger, right?" He's like, "Michael Shellenberger's up here." And the crowd's just, they knew about the Twitter Files. Afterwards, we go down, and it's just, it's just a lot of emotion and anger, but also hope. The Brazilian people are, for me, it's like one of the most exciting cultures in the world because they're so expressive. The president, like while he's speaking, he's like crying. It's a very like emotionally open culture. So now, I mean, the question for Elon, and they're having to negotiate this, is do you out of principle keep, X banned in Brazil to defend the several dozen people that the government is requiring be banned permanently? But that means that 20 million Brazilians are denied X as a platform. Or do you go along with what the government's demanding and hope to fight for another day? And that's what's happening now.
The 12 people, it's 12 people?
We actually don't know, but it probably under 100.
And what are they being accused of that the government is saying is so important that they need to be banned?
Misinformation. Particularly, you can see every country in the world is particularly obsessed with COVID misinformation and election misinformation. Mm-hmm. So, but to give you an example of how arbitrary and unjust it is, there's one of the members of Congress who's one of the most dynamic. He's not actually in the party of Bolsonaro. That's the controversial former president. He's in a different party. His name is Marcel van Hatten. And he didn't even know this until the Twitter Files Brazil came out, and then Elon did release, because the House of Representatives, Jim Jordan, asked for these internal files from X. He subpoenaed them, so we even learned more information from those files. They showed that Van Hatten was supposedly being deplatformed for election misinformation, But it turned out that the video he posted was posted the day after the elections, and it had to do with labor issues, had nothing to do with elections. And that's just really common. I mean, you just see it's just arbitrary rule by one guy. That's why I say it's a dictatorship.
And has there been any debate or discussion? Like, has anybody tried to hold him to the fire as to why these people are being banned? And please prove that this is misinformation. Has there been any sort of discussion?
Oh, huge. I mean, it's maybe one of the biggest issues in Brazil. It's the president of Brazil who probably hasn't gotten enough criticism for it because he's going along with it. He defended the censorship.
Lula?
This is Lula.
I always heard that he was a great guy when Jair Bolsonaro was the president. The narrative was Bolsonaro was a dictator, that he was a bad guy. But I know so many Brazilians, from jiu-jitsu, I know so many Brazilians, and they all love Bolsonaro. I was like, I am so confused about their politics over there. I don't know what's going on. But Lula was supposed to be this guy that was for the people. And to hear that he is a part of this whole disinformation crackdown, alleged disinformation crackdown, is so disheartening.
Well, yeah, I mean, for me personally, so the funny thing is I had this, just coincidentally, I have this deep relationship with Brazil because I lived in Brazil in the early 90s. I was actually working towards my PhD in the semi-Amazon. I went to Rio and Sao Paulo. I interviewed Lula in 1994, sat across from him just like I'm sitting across from you right now.
What was your take on him?
At the time I loved him. I mean, I was on the radical left for, up until 5 minutes ago. And so
up until the Kool-Aid wore off.
Yeah. I mean, even until even up until the censorship part. I mean, when you start censoring, you're just like, not to digress, but it's kind of like, back in the 90s, we were anti-war, pro-free speech and pro-gay rights.
Yeah.
Now the left is pro-censorship, pro-war, and engaged in horrible medical mistreatment of gay children in the name of trans medicine. Yeah. So it's like literally like who changed here? Right. My values did stay the same, at least on those things. But anyway, I mean, I sat across from him and I just said, everybody says that you're going to turn Brazil into Cuba. He does love Fidel Castro, but he said absolutely not. He does. No, seriously, they're bros. They're bros. I mean, but
that seems like a bit of a problem.
The thing is that in Latin America, like everybody on the left, even some of the center left, they actually had a lot of respect for Fidel. I know it's amazing, but they really did.
So crazy.
Yeah. He was a very charismatic person. I actually met him too.
Really?
I met all these guys. I met Hugo Chavez.
Do you think he's Justin Trudeau's dad?
Oh, hell yeah. Have you seen the photographs?
It's crazy. It is crazy. It really is crazy.
But
he kind of looks like his dad too.
Maybe. I mean for me, it's like Ronan Farrow.
The Ronan Farrow, Frank Sinatra one is just insane.
Yeah.
That is not Woody Allen's kid.
No.
Like, no ifs, ands,
that one's
or
more
buts.
dramatic than the
That
Trudeau
one's
one.
crazy. I mean, that looks like Frank Sinatra.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what are the odds? Unless she loves Sinatra so much, she willed him into existence in her own child.
Immaculate Conception.
Yeah.
But anyway, so I asked Lula directly. I said, and I actually wrote an article for a left-wing magazine at the time. I said, are you going to try to turn Brazil into Cuba and have censorship? And he said, absolutely not. Our socialism is going to be democratic socialism. And that was my attraction to Brazil too, was that, and to the Workers' Party and to Lula. He was he had all the stuff that you loved about the left, but he was going to respect free speech. So I, basically after the Tour Files Brazil and the Workers' Party, and Lula just start defending censorship, then I start going after Lula too. And I'm like, you lied to me, and this is,
what do you think changed?
Unacceptable. Wow, great question. There's a way in which it's the same thing that changed for the left everywhere. This is the question we're always asking, which is like,
how?
Because if you read the histories, I've been, I'm now, by the way, we're going to spend 3 months in Austin every year now because I'm the CBR chair of politics, censorship, and free speech at the University of Austin.
Oh.
I'm the first and only endowed chair there. So it's exciting. So I'm here and...
Well, welcome.
Thank you, man. I'm really... Yeah, we just bought a little house and...
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, yeah, because of course, if you read the histories of free speech, particularly the last couple hundred years, it's really the right censoring the left. Right. There's a few exceptions, but overwhelmingly, all the way back to the original, French Parliament where they split, the French Congress where they split people on left and right became a way to refer to liberals and conservatives. Conservatives were about protecting tradition, about propriety, don't say certain things. That was like what conservatives were. And then if you go to the United States, like one of the most dramatic instances of censorship here is the early part of the 20th century with the Sedition Act, and that's when they were, arresting socialists, incarcerating thousands of people. I mean, it's a crazy period. And so that's basically the tradition. That's why when we were, in the 90s and up until recently, free speech was part of the left tradition. So what happened? I mean, what's clear about the censorship that's going on is it's counter-populist. So they're going at Jair Bolsonaro, like Trump, is a populist candidate. So one thought experiment would be, if Bernie Sanders had become president in 2016, would the deep state have sided with? Would they have sided with the right, with the Republicans, to censor a populist Democratic Party? It's an interesting question. I don't know the answer to it. Clearly, I mean, I would say if you look at what the global elite, which is kind of a center-left elite in Europe, Brazil, United States, Canada, it really wants to censor on COVID, elections, and migration. And they do the mass migration stuff around hate. So like if you criticize mass migration, it's hate speech and you should be censored. So clearly this is a reaction by the deep state against populism, which clearly threatens their ability to be able to wage war when they want to wage war, to move people around. I mean, it's huge. I mean, the mass migration that's been occurring under Biden, of course, has been happening in Europe too. And everybody's like, what's going on? Like, why is this happening?